Welcome back. Today we are on the awesome topic of problem solving.
This is your realm, my
One of
dude.
my favorites. I love causing problems and letting other people solve them. It's my favorite thing to do. So we're going to get into this a little bit today. But first off, like we always do, we're going to reach straight out of the DMG, the holy DMG, and learn a little bit more about who are our problem-solving players. How do we recognize them as DMs? Riley, do you want to take that for us?
Yes, sir. Players who want to solve problems like to scrutinize NPC motivations, untangle a villain's machinations, solve puzzles, and come up with plans.
Yeah, these are the problem solvers. They love thwarting the big bad guy's plan, right? They want to make your big bad guy's life absolutely miserable, just as much as you, as the big bad guy, want to make the player's life miserable. Another giveaway for these guys are they are your planners, right? Anything that comes up, they're like, all right, let's figure out how we can do this. You go this way, I'll go this way. They want to, in a way, optimize the outcome of the situation.
This is a great point that you bring up. My very first campaign as a DM, fresh DM, spent way too much time putting together my campaign. I had a point where the characters were going to go into the spider lair, kind of Shelob-esque style, to find something. I don't remember what it was. It was so many years ago, and I spent about 4 hours prepping this one little lair that they were going to go into, and they ended up showing up to the mouth of this lair, and I specifically made most, if not all, of the surfaces within this cave covered in webs, to kind of make it a difficult terrain and somewhat difficult for the players. Well, they decided to just set a torch to it and literally just burned everything inside of this lair, and that was not something that occurred to me. The flammability of the webs and the fact that they could literally just have a barbecue with whatever's inside and then wait for it to stop burning and go in and collect whatever it is that they needed. And it was it was horrible but wonderful at the same time, because the 4 hours I spent on it were kind of null and void now, but they came up with a very creative solution to bypass that, and it was not something that I had thought of. And rule of cool, that was a pivotal moment for me as a DM. Be like, player choice matters, and they're always going to come up with something that you might not expect, might not have seen from your own eyes as to how to solve it. There's more than one way to solve things. So it's also a great idea to have not one specific way to solve a problem, because you know that your players are going to come up with multiple different ways to solve it, and probably choose one that you didn't think of.
There's a lot of different ways to solve problems, right? And so you can't ever, you can generally perhaps guess as a DM, okay, what are my players going to do? They're probably going to do this. You can kind of make a couple of assumptions, but there's no real way of knowing exactly what your players are going to do. One player might bring a completely different mindset to solving problems than another player. One player might just decide, you know what? I solve problems by crushing skulls, and that's just how we do things here. And another player might be, much more like a pacifist and realizes that, hey, maybe his player isn't strong enough to just crush skulls and make things happen. He might have to talk his way through things a little more. It's important to allow for the problems that you present your players with to be solved in multiple ways, and not just the way that you think it should be solved as a DM, but if a solution seems to be sufficient, I would say, hey, doors open, man.
Yeah, and I even came up with a quick boat race mini game campaign in our most recent campaign, and there's a whole lot of elaborate mechanics to it, a whole price thing to upgrade your ship and kind of get the players to spend a bunch of money. And the first thing that they stated was, well, let's just not put any money into it, and then let's just hijack the nearest ship and we'll just take over theirs. They spent all the money and we'll just, hijack it. Never even crossed my mind. I was like, dang, they just thwarted like 90% of the mechanics of this game. Like that was genius. They just right off the bat said something. The first idea that came to their head was not one of the 97 things that I had thought of that they had come up with. So knowing your players, this you won't always be able to expect the unexpected, but having a very generalized way to solve things, or just having a problem and not knowing how to fix it, just letting the players figure it out, is also a great way, because then you're surprised whatever result they come up with is how it was supposed to be solved.
Once you've got, you probably have a couple players rolling around in your head right now of like, oh yeah, this guy, he's definitely a problem solver, right? And like we said before, you can be a mix of a lot of things, right? You might not be just 100% problem solver, but we're going to go ahead and go through these 4 different points here. And it's going to teach us a little bit about how we can engage our players. First one right off the top here. Engage players who like to solve problems by including encounters that emphasize problem solving.
Puzzles definitely come to mind when I think of these, because naturally there's an emphasis in solving this riddle to get past the door. The whole Harry Potter movie, the first one comes to mind. There's like 3 different things that they have to go past. They have to get past the 3-headed dog. Then there's the whatever the vines were that were like opposite of quicksand, and then the game of chess. Like there was different things that they had to like overcome to get to their destination. This is the typical problem solving go-to. But there are multiple ways that we can go about this, and it doesn't always have to result in a puzzle. We talked about in our fighting episode bringing in social encounters to kind of mix and match and make combat more dynamic. And similarly here with puzzles, we can bring in something similar to combat to kind of give a time constraint or even a sense of urgency. There was, a campaign Christian ran. There was a puzzle that we needed to solve. I'm not entirely sure what the goal was. We ended up having to kind of split the party, being like I was the cleric / tank of the group, and our ranger friend was like, okay, like we've got enemies coming in, we've got to solve this puzzle. You 2 figure this out. We'll hold them off as best we can. And we kind of split roles. The other 2 players tried, were solving the riddle and doing what they could to kind of get it going, while we were trying to hold off and keep, the enemies from kind of swarming us and swarming the characters so that they could finish it. And so it created this dynamic. It created a sense of urgency, and it made it a lot more fun than just thinking of a puzzle or possibly even have time to pull up my phone and Google it. That's not as fun as if it's like there's combat involved, there's a time limit or whatever it might be.
You can create problems as a DM in very simple ways that can create a lot of drama and actually really drive your adventures forward and engage players. Maybe your players are searching for some NPC. He's got some information that they need. Maybe he witnessed a murder or whatever information he has. And, the players are trying to track this guy down. They find out he's in a town nearby. They roll into town. They're like, all right, where's this guy? And they find out that there he is. He's up on the stage being publicly executed. It's now a very big problem that they have to solve in a very short amount of time, right? There's a variety of ways to solve that problem, right? Do they break him out and make a run for it? Maybe there's quite a few guards. Do they, start chatting with the guards and trying to talk them down, or at least delay the situation? Do they just jump right up on stage and question the guy right there? Hey, you, give us your information. Lots of different ways to solve the problem, but your job as a DM is to present these problems to the players. And you can do so in just creative different ways, right? Maybe when they're going to the next town that they're supposed to go to, maybe the city's on lockdown, right? I don't know. COVID broke out, whatever it might be, but it's on lockdown, right? But the players have to get in. So maybe they've got to figure out a way to sneak in now, which creates a whole nother little side adventure for them to do. And it can be incredibly rewarding to know that, hey, we weren't supposed to be in here, but we just snuck in anyway, right? Like that's the kind of problem solving that you can do, is you can just slightly twist a situation and create a whole nother problem that requires a whole nother solution and outcome.
And a lot of times your players, especially if they're kind of murder hobo-ish, will create these situations for you. Turn their situations on them.
So
If they are in a town and the leaders of the town are like part of this cult, and they find out about it, and to kind of prove it, they end up going and kind of sneaking in on the secret meeting, or they infiltrate the meeting somehow with one of their own, and then some, end up murdering all the leaders just because they, kind of panicked. And then they leave town. Later, coming back, they need some information from someone in that town that they started out in. The town's under lockdown, and they're now part of, consideration because they were here at the time of the murders, and they got to find a way to prove their innocence, or lie about their innocence, or whatever. Let their mistakes as well become part of the campaign. Let their decisions come back to them, maybe later, maybe it's sooner than that example. Allow those mistakes to also become situations that they have to problem solve. They created the issue, let them figure out how to solve it. There's a lot less work on your end. That's usually stuff that ends up happening in every campaign. There's something that the players end up doing that, they blow up a market and kill a bunch of people, and the rest of the party has to deal with, how that player acted, or, it's just things like that.
Definitely was not me, I promise.
These examples are too real.
This really leads you into this next piece: rewarding planning and tactics with in-game benefits.
In our optimization video, we also talked about this a little bit at some social encounters. But if they're, let's say they're in like a political intrigue portion of the campaign where they're trying to solve something similar to a lawyer would in court, for their client, instead of combat, they have to solve things diplomatically. They come up, and they role play, and they do all these things really well, and they come up with a plan to, stumble up the opponent somehow. Or they just end up doing it, willy-nilly. Maybe instead of having them roll for something, they catch them off guard so bad that they don't need to roll, or that we also talked about this, failing forward. Even if they crit fail their deception check, like they role played it so well, or they had planned it out so well in advance that it's really hard for them to fail, that it's just less impressive as it could have been had they rolled, say, a nat 20. And the rolls then describe that rather than describing whether they succeed or fail.
These in-game benefits, we would probably recommend more of a mechanical approach on some of these, right? So when your players are sitting there, they're brainstorming, they're coming up with a plan, I don't know, they roll well on perception or something like that, and they can see a little bit in the distance that, oh, hey, there's a caravan coming, and it's the guys we're looking for. They make a plan to solve this problem. They shuffle off and they create an ambush. Well, you should be giving them, surprise rounds, advantage, all of these different things they should be rewarded with, because they have themselves in a position to have the upper hand in the encounter. It'd be a very different situation if they just ran headstrong into these guys, right? Just screaming and yelling. I think you're probably not going to give them advantage on that. Maybe some intimidation checks, depending on who they're dealing with. But whatever way they decide to solve the problem, make sure you can include some rewards if it's clever enough for you as a DM. And that honestly plays in perfectly with the next point, say non-mechanical side perhaps. It says, occasionally allow a smart plan to grant an easy win for the players.
The rule of cool is kind of an unsung rule amongst DMs. It's nowhere found in any of the published content. But it's something that we kind of label these fun interactions where the players may come up with something that you allow one time because in the moment makes for such a great storytelling moment that it's okay that we bend the rules for this one time for this very cool, scenario. It allows you to err on the side of what will make us have more fun. If I say no to this, are they just going to stop? Is this going to push things forward? Is this going to break the game? No. Let's have fun then. Yeah, the player wants to do some fun stuff. Just allow it to happen. If it breaks some rules, maybe allow it this once because it was really cool. It makes it a lot more dynamic for the players. It makes them more engaged and wanting to do things. Also, as DMs, be sure while you are still part of like the party and the players at the table, you hear them talking and scheming. Please do not, as you hear them coming up with this perfect plan, because you wanted this to be a dynamic, infiltration, don't come up with ways to thwart that. If they come up with a wonderful plan that includes them climbing the wall and then they have this big elaborate plan afterwards, don't all of a sudden when they get to the wall after they've spent an hour of planning say that, oh, the wall's too slippery to climb. Like that, it ruins the fun, and it makes them feel like you now are out to get them. That's not your job as the DM. Your job is to create drama, and maybe there's some checks that they have to make as they get up the wall. Once again, failing forward, but whether or not they're clumsy and make noise is up to you. And maybe they alert the guards, and that's their only downfall, rather than making it perfect. It's the rule of cool. What is the most fun at the table? How can we have the most fun at the table? Thwarting their plans just because you heard it is not the way to go.
Like we said, you do have to try to anticipate, solutions to the problems you present your players with. Otherwise, you're not really going to know where something goes next, right? But that doesn't mean that the problem that you anticipate, the solution that you are anticipating is the only solution. Your players are kind of they can tell if they're going to catch on that, oh, we just got to like randomly try stuff until he lets us through. And that's no fun as a player, right? They really want to try to uncover the solution so that they can go through. Just reward your players for trying different stuff, and if something is satisfying enough, allow it to go through.
Yeah, even if you come up with at least one way to solve the puzzle that you've come up with, or you make sure that the puzzle itself has multiple ways to solve it, but at least one of them, then that way when the players end up thwarting that in a different way, you have that like, oh my gosh, like well done, and then the players feel like, oh, that wasn't the actual way we were supposed to solve it, but we still solved it. Like, good for us. It's once again, it's kind of a rewarding way for them to be like, hey, we did a good thing. We beat the DM yet again at his own game, kind of a thing. Sure. Our final point, we move on to creating NPCs with complex motives. Now, this doesn't always have to be your big, bad, evil guy. Not everything has to revolve around the main villain. This can be side quest material. If you plan for people to have kind of complex backstories that allow the players to engage with them and feel emotions and attach to them, or envy and fury, things like that kind of push and drive them to do certain things either with that or against them. This opens many doors for your players in their decision-making process in the campaign, and makes it feel very open world, and makes you look like a lot better DM, as there's so many options for the players.
Yeah, and you know what? If these are your big baddies, right? This is your Thanos, right? When you can take somebody's morals and just twist them a little bit. Thanos is fully fledged, like headstrong. He's like, I'm doing a good thing, right? I am taking out half the population of the entire universe and beyond, and that is in order to, stop overpopulation, and then people can have food and they're not going to starve to death and die, right? That's like, in his head, that's great. Now, if you can take that same basic principle, maybe this guy that is, running raids and pillaging villages is, just trying to find medication for his sick daughter or something like that, right? I wouldn't put too much time into this, and not everybody has to have this like secondary motive or underlying I don't know, ego that they've got to go with, but
you'll spend hours prepping if you do that. You would too
never
many hours.
Stop. Don't do it for everybody, but it is always very fun to, as a player, you're like, man, that's like a tough decision. If we stop Thanos, hundreds of millions of people are going to starve to death. Like, that's just a reality you have to face, right? Or if we stop this guy, from raiding all these towns, his daughter's very well going to die, and it's, that's a moral decision you got to make as a player. Is it better to stop that person and save, the few that are getting laid to waste, or,
It's
What do you do?
it's the old meme of you're at
Oh,
the railroad
the trolley
tracks.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the trolley, and you're the one with the switch, and over here you have, a kid who's, got a long life to live or whatnot on one side of the track, and over on this other track, there's an old man who's about ready to, like, which one do you choose to get hit by the trolley? It's someone's got
Somebody's
to
getting
die.
hit.
Who's it gonna be? No decision is technically right, but there's it provides that moral, like, someone's gonna die. How it's just, do we save the 100,000 that die of starvation, or do we start, save the 2 billion that die because Thanos thinks that it's better to save? You know what I mean? It's someone. There's still a bunch of people. You're still,
Someone's
chopping the
yeah.
head off of someone.
That's very true. Yeah, put your players in front of that give them the lever. They've got to pull that one way or the other. No matter what, something
And
difficult is going to happen, right?
watch them build a third route and
They
derail that
they will
trolley, and
they'll build a jump that leaps over both of them and lands uh, on the track
and
or whatever.
let it
But
happen.
and you
Let
know
it
what?
happen.
If that happens, all
Good
power
for
to
them.
them, man. All power to them. You can prep for future stuff, but don't change your current situation to quickly thwart something that they try to do.
Yeah, so to recap, we haven't talked as much about rewarding your players in this one as we have some of our other, but I feel like not thwarting their plans. There's a lot of planning involved in these problem solving characters. Players that like to problem solve like to plan, they like to think ahead of time. And if you're sitting there cutting down every single ladder that they build, they're going to stop problem solving. And so letting them carry out their plans is kind of reward in and of itself. And it also, when other players see this player problem solve in that way, build a plan, execute it, and be successful, makes them want to be successful too in the same scenario. Maybe it allows them to be more team players, and the dynamic of the table changes and everyone starts having fun in different ways.
Absolutely. So DMs, get out there, cause your problems, let your players figure out how to solve them, and then reward them for those. Right? Give them their advantage, give them their inspiration, surprise rounds, whatever it might be, to help them out in their situations. And if it be a good enough plan, let them thwart your whole thing. Your 4 hours of prep, throw it out the window. Great job, guys. You did well. That's pretty much all we've got for problem solving today. Catch us on the last video. It's going to be storytelling, and we're going to dig into all of your fun players who love to tell their stories. They've got your 20-page backstories, whatever it may be. We'll hop in on that. So until next time, we'll see you then.